Hello. Good. If you're in the central time zone region, good afternoon. If you are to the right of us, I guess, to the left of us, whatever direction you happen to be facing, good morning still. Welcome back to Taxation is Theft Fest 2020. I'm your host, Scott Zimmerman. You see the name on the screen appears as ZTrack, ZTrack Productions. Check it out. Only presence on Facebook. But you don't want to hear about me. You didn't tune in to hear about me today. No, Taxation is Theft Fest 2020 is really proud to bring up our next guest. Our next guest here, Dr. Buchman. Am I pronouncing that right? I am. Good morning. I'm sorry. It's Dr.
Buchman, but
Buchman.
Just in Germany.
Buchman. Okay, I took German for 4 years in high school. I should be able to handle that.
Add another N, and then you'll get it right.
Okay, perfect. So welcome, sir. I'm super excited. I was reading your bio here, and Dr. Buchman holds an MBA in finance from Purdue, a PhD from Indiana University, and has been a guest on Coast to Coast AM, given Exopolitics-related presentations at TED, at Burning Man, Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, which is where I think I first experienced one of your talks. NASA's SET, Conference with Mountain View, Contact in the Desert, and Joshua Tree, the Society of Scientific Investigation in Boulder, the X conferences and citizens hearing in Washington, D.C., and Roswell UFO Fest in Roswell. Former chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah, and we'll talk probably a little bit about that. The National Platform Committee as well, and has run as a Libertarian candidate for U.S. Congress twice. Thank you for your service. Each time calling for Congressional Whistle-Blower Protection, and then open hearings on waste, fraud, criminal activity, and of course, the ET issue. Welcome, Dr. Buchman. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm hoping mostly we can do this by taking questions or you and I just having a conversation. I guess I want to start out with where I'm at on the philosophical spectrum of libertarianism. You know, I've been a pretty serious candidate twice. I ran in 2008 for the United States Congress. Rob Bishop currently holds that seat. 2017, my representative here, Jason Chaffetz, resigned a couple of months after getting elected, caused a special election in the state. I think you ought to be billed for the cost of hosting that special election. And ran again, this time former mayor of Provo, Utah, John Curtis, won that election, is in that seat. And the difference between the two runs could not have been more dramatic. In 2008, I announced that campaign at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. It's a pretty serious campaign, I thought, and yet the Salt Lake Tribune, KSL Radio, my local paper, the Park Record up in Park City, Utah, all had a lot of fun just ridiculing the crap out of me. And, you know, it's what the media does. They're in the entertainment business, not just the facts gathering business. They're about eyeballs and advertisers. I know that. I used to teach it. I was a professor of marketing. So, okay, fine. 2017, when I ran, there was a significant paradigm shift, which was not only personally experienced by me, but I think reflected in the media coverage of that time. So what changed between the two runs for Congress? I think the tipping point was the 2013 citizens hearing on disclosure, where we gathered 6 former members of the United States Congress, 5 members of the House. Let's see if I can name them still. Darlene Hooley, Lynn Woolsey, Merrill Cook, Roscoe Bartlett, Carolyn Kilpatrick, and then one former U.S. Senator who had run for the Libertarian presidential nomination in Denver in 2012, Mike Gravel. Senator Gravel, the senator who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record to protect the New York Times from the evil Nixon administration, that whistleblower, that guy. And you go look at his comments from the 5 days and 40 hours of vetted testimony in the main ballroom of the National Press Club, set as a congressional hearing room for a joint meeting with the House and Senate, is remarkable. And, you know, Gravel made statements very much around the issue being one that should be taken seriously, not only by the United States government, but by the United Nations. Go read that testimony. We had 40 witnesses from 10 different nations. It was broadcast live. It was translated into multiple languages. I think that was part of the tipping point. What then came later was an article in the New York Times, December 16th, 2017, after that 2017 special election was over, but just after it was over, by award-winning journalist Leslie Kean, where the New York Times revealed the existence of these videos, which now just 2 weeks ago, the Pentagon came out and said, yep, that's really our footage. That's really out of our equipment that's on, at least what the white world knows is the best of our military assets that are flying off both the west and east coasts of this nation. And we have technology with no exhaust, no obvious aerodynamic structures, none at all. Something like a 60-foot long flying tic-tac bounces around, performs in ways that would turn a human body into jello. And we've got footage of that. Not because it maybe didn't exist in the past, but because our technology for capturing these advanced crafts got better. It's something called forward-looking infrared radar, or FLIR. That video came out. It was released in 2017. It took the Pentagon 2 years to confirm that indeed this is actual real video. So it raises a lot of questions now for people who are serious about this subject. What else do we have? And what we have are pilots from World War II reporting things that were described as Foo Fighters, not that different from what we see in FLIR. And then a body of evidence that may exist between that time and now. And we have testimony from people who've had access to it saying, yes, indeed, it's there. People like, oh, I don't know, guy who earned a PhD at MIT and was the 6th human being to walk on the moon, an Apollo astronaut named Edgar Mitchell. You go Google that, you'll find him saying, I've been privileged enough to have been briefed on the fact that we've attempted to reverse engineer non-human created technology. I don't know about you, but that got my undivided attention for a while. So I say all this stuff, and yet I get branded as a UFO nut. Certainly more so in 2008 than in 2017. Back in 2008, a former political director of the National Party actually tried to get me removed from the ticket. I'm not unsympathetic to that, because I started this conversation by saying I want to talk about where I'm at on the libertarian political spectrum. Disappointed that Congressman Amash dropped out yesterday. Almost heartbroken. I think we ought to be attractive to people like Congressman Amash. I don't know that I would have voted for him. I've sworn I wouldn't vote for any more Republicans seeking our nomination at the last minute. But my God, this guy's got a great track record. And you know, I hope he stays around. But Bob Barr left, Wayne Allen Root left, Bill Weld has left. Gosh, I'm tired of that. And you know, so you look at what drives people like that away. I think a guy with a boot on his head might be doing that. I think a National Party officer with a pink wig or dyed hair, I'm not sure which, might be doing that. And here I am, your UFO nut. I'm concerned that I'm doing that. I say, what's the distinction around UFOs that would cause political candidates to touch this with a 10-foot pole? It generally doesn't do them a lot of good electorally. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't believe everything I see in the UFO community. Roswell is mostly a party. It's a fun party. There's a lot of people there in need of immediate, intense psychiatric intervention and institutionalization. Speaking as a libertarian, yes, they ought to be put in institutions behind locked doors. I'm being sarcastic. Contact in the desert, channeling the Pleiadians. We went out there the other night. We saw this thing. They came down. They talked to me. You couldn't hear what they were saying because you're not as enlightened to me. You didn't meditate. You didn't use the right Sanskrit word. I'm sorry. It may be credible, but I just don't have time for it. I just chuck all that stuff off to the side. So I'm only looking at maybe 2 or 3% of the body of evidence that's out there in the UFO world. And so when I was on with Chrissy and Jess the other day, they said, you know, do you believe in UFOs? I'm offended by the question. Belief is a verb that ought to be used in the world of religion and not in science. I did earn a legitimate PhD. I did have research published. I did earn grants. I did some of those kind of traditional academic things. It's not about belief. I mean, belief takes it out of the world of science, and it belongs in the world of science. So the question I like to be asked is, what's the most credible evidence that's out there? And I think there's something we ought to be looking at. I'm not sure it meets the threshold for a libertarian presidential candidate to be talking about it. That might put us in the world of boots and pink hair and crazy that drives people to reconsider whether they want to run for a presidential nomination or not. So anyhow, gosh, now I've talked for 10 minutes. I can do this 3-4 more times, and then we can call it a day. What would you like to hear about? Is there anyone out there? These questions on the side? Am I reading a chat?
Let me see if we got some comments here. We don't have anything rolling in just yet. I know we got some people listening. Got a greeting, a hello. See people tuned in. So I guess a couple of things to talk about. I guess that you brought it just here in the short little time that you started talking. Obviously, you've been around the Libertarian Party for quite some time.
Yeah, actually, if you look, let's see if I can get my finger go to the right direction. That's my original John Hospers for President poster.
Wow.
Not one that I bought, but one a good friend gave me.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's a collectible. It's got a prominent space on the wall where it belongs.
It does. It's moved to the guest bedroom when people like Andre Maru or Nick Sarwark or Jeff Hewitt stay here. I put it over their bed, and then I'm tempted to get a plaque about who's actually spent the night here.
Sure. But yeah, when you talk about the perspectives of people from outside the organization, and the opinions of people, all too often I feel like, and you probably have seen this in your time. I've been around the block a couple of times with the libertarians myself, and what I find is that all too often we get caught up in the echo chamber of hearing ourselves speak, that we don't realize how we sound. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we sound nuts.
Right?
I know I have some friends watching right now that think taxation is theft. Right there, they're turned off, not willing to listen any longer. You got to have some taxation. You got to have some aircraft carriers or whatever to protect us from the bad guys. You got to have a social safety net. You got to have interstate highways. So we're already in a deep hole. And then you got the UFO guy on top of it.
Yeah. In order to protect the brand, I'll keep my opinions on taxation as theft to myself. But I do love the.
I'll just say taxation is theft. The non-consensual taking of the productive work of another is slavery in its most extreme form. Taxation is theft is saying it nicely. I will say, however, I don't think taxation is theft in certain narrow cases. Maybe the recovery of environmental externalities. Maybe that's something that isn't quite theft. But that's a conversation for that echo chamber you were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah,
go ahead.
And one that we spend way too much time focusing on deciding what is the right answer, versus how we should convince others that we have the right answers.
Or answers that are going to move us incrementally in a good direction. That's what would sell a politician. And I'll tell you, I converted maybe from being that kind of inward-focused, Randian, Heinleinian, whatever, libertarian fog. Get out and run for office. You want to get over that kind of non-working way of libertarian being? Put your name on a ballot, dig a couple of grand out of your wallet, take the heat of 1,000 media questions and people who want to make you look silly. And I think that would be a good thing. I was going to use, some expletives that might not be all that appropriate, although we're not on broadcast television.
We're not on CBS.
Throw the freak up. And I think that would do the party a lot of good. And don't lead with taxation as theft all the time. Some audiences, sure. This one, sure. By the way, if you're watching me, turn this off and tune into Dr. Mary Ruart. Much better way to learn how to do what I'm talking about right now. we've gotten off the ET UFO field, and
we have. That's what you're supposed to talk about, right?
So I'm noticing, and I appreciate this, crawling across the bottom is Paradigm Research Group. So I'll talk about that for a minute.
Please do.
Look for the best evidence, go there. That's not my website. That's Steve Bassett, a good friend of mine, a political activist way back, a guy who's run for Congress. He ran as a Democrat in DC the year that they had the guys shooting out of the trunk of a car through the license plate hole they had made. Got wiped off media coverage for that. It was a tough campaign. Steve's a good guy. We don't agree politically on a lot of things. Well, we agree on a few. Certainly haven't converted him to libertarianism yet. And I know what I want to talk about next. But before I do that, go to paradigmresearchgroup.org. That's where you'll find what Steve's attempted to create as the best of the best media coverage and some evidence. It was Steve who organized the citizens hearing on disclosure. It was Steve who rented the National Press Room main ballroom, who recruited the 43 witnesses from 10 different nations, put all that together and credited me with finding 5 out of the 6 Congress people who were willing to serve, including Mike Gravel, because I had met him in Denver. What I said at Steve's X conference in 2007, or maybe it was 2008, during my first run, I had this epiphany there. By the way, it was at the X conference in Washington, D.C., actually Gaithersburg, that Steve hosted, that I met Paul Hellyer, the former Minister of Defense for Canada, speaks on this issue. He's in his 90s now, still talking about it. Dr. Ed Mitchell, sixth man to walk on the moon. I previously met him in Roswell, and one of the curious facts of history is the 6th man to walk on the moon was raised in Roswell, New Mexico. He was witness to the Trinity test site explosion, I think at 5:45 or so a.m. on July 15th, 1945. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody go Google it. And the government said, yeah, we had a weapons depot explosion. And he knew then as a young teenager that the government lies about things. It was at the X conference in Washington, D.C. I met other political figures, serious testimony there. It was Steve's effort to put the best of the evidence right in the backyard of the congressional staff. He realized probably no elected officials would show. But we know members of their staff were there, and they're curious about this. A lot of them have had classified briefings. They know more than I'll probably ever know. But anyway, I had an epiphany at the X conference, which was there are 0. And tell me if I'm wrong here. Is it ZTrack or Zach? What should I call you?
So my birth name is Scott,
Hey, Scott.
but my internet persona falls under ZTrack. So I'm good either way. But you can call me Scott Zimmerman. I'm not hiding from the government or anything. So.
That's great. Well, my Burning Man name is Joby. Jobi. Jobi. Oh, we had like 5 people working on the census team, all named Joe. And I said, I don't have a playa name. I guess I could be Joe B. And they said, no, that's your name. One of my coworkers named me, and she said, that's Joe B, Jobi, the opposite of FOMO. And I said, because I'm supposed to, what's FOMO? They said, the fear of missing out. You're the joy of being included. So
Love it.
My Burning Man name, burner name.
Love it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Z-Track. This is my theory. And I feel a little like Monty Python with the dinosaurs. Very thin on one end, very big in the middle, very thin on the other end. If you don't know that Monty Python skit, please forgive me. I'm a nerd. Here's my theory. 0 Democrats anywhere in the cosmos. 0 Republicans anywhere in the cosmos, except for on this one backward planet. But if there's life out there that has access to extremely powerful technology, a technology that would get them superliminally somehow from there to here. Like if there are flying saucers here, they didn't burn petroleum to get here. They're using some kind of technology we can't imagine. Something like somebody in the 1800s looking at our sun and saying, well, if it's made out of coal, it should have burned out a long time ago. They didn't know about nuclear energy. Well, something beyond nuclear. So 0 Republicans, 0 Democrats, anywhere in the cosmos except for on this one backward planet. But if there's life out there that has access to really powerful technology and hasn't used it to blow themselves or others up, by definition, that means they have the non-aggression principle as a core value. They probably have self-ownership as another core value. That means if there's life out there, Z-Track, they're all libertarians. Otherwise, they died. Give me liberty or give me death was not a choice. It's a statement of natural law. Without non-aggression as a core value, without liberty living in your heart and having that spread through your community, you go extinct, certainly in the time realm of the cosmos. So I'll say it one more time. If there's life out there in the cosmos, if it's traveling across interstellar distances, using technology that probably makes a pretty powerful bomb if you use it wrong or use it for that purpose, if they're getting here, and so far, based on the evidence, they're either benign to benevolent. You know, they could have shut this planet down if they're here doing the things that it appears they're doing on that FLIR video, for example. Then they're libertarians. The universe is teeming with libertarians. The only place there is a lack of a sufficient number is on this one backward planet, and perhaps a few others that have been isolated from where intelligent life might want to drop by and have a cup of tea. That's me in a nutshell. That may be the best I've ever said it. What do you think, ZTrack?
I love it. I love it. You bring up such a good point, but you think about where planet Earth and the human life cycle is in the evolution of the planet, in the greater scale, like on a long enough timeline. I mean, the cosmos, the universe is, as far as we know it, infinite. It keeps going, right? So on a long enough timeline, there are planets that are literally billions upon billions of years more evolved and advanced than what we have done as a society. We're primitive in the grand scheme of things. If those life forms that have been here, and I'm of the school of thought that they've been here, they've passed us by, and I don't think they're planning on coming back. I'm of that school of thought, and maybe that's my own kind of blindness chipping in. I mean, I remember back in the day, it was all the rage. The UFOs, and now, I mean, it's become more of a mainstream concept and an idea, but we've seen less what I would consider extraterrestrial activity in our planetary system, and more of the unidentified flying object phenomenon, which could be our own technologies, could be other technologies being sent out in probe or drone forms. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we talk about extraterrestrials and the chances that they've been here. Is that still a possibility?
Yeah, so here's that tipping point I was talking about. Now we're in the kind of conversations science ought to be having, right? This isn't about do you believe in UFOs anymore or not between ZTrack and me. This is an interesting conversation. So yeah, what about the patterns of how evidence has changed over time? So Contact in the Desert, I've met Eric von Daniken. I've got a couple of dozen of his books autographed. I was looking forward to going back to get even more. I can't take more than 10 at a time to any given author. This guy's published, I think, something in the 40s. He's the guy who first wrote the Ancient Astronaut books, and he's compelling. It's fascinating. You go back and reread biblical accounts and insert extraterrestrial for angel. There's a certain attractiveness to that. Certainly he's not quite in mainstream science, but he and others are out there doing legitimate archaeological work. And there's things that can't be easily explained that were created in our prehistory that are puzzlers. And to jump to aliens, not mainstream science to jump to aliens. So I'm not unsympathetic to that. Were they here and then they left? I don't know. There was certainly kind of this Space Brothers movement back in the 40s and 50s, which is now pretty much gone, that there were these kindly people living on Venus. The odds of that are pretty small. Venus is a pretty nasty place with raining liquid metal. Or they were from Mars. Well, Mars looks pretty dead. Are they time travelers? I don't know. That's an interesting question that might be worth looking at. I really just don't know. What I do know is there's enough hard evidence that it's got my attention, and I think it's worthy of the attention of others. And I think this idea that connects the two with libertarianism, which is if you're going to survive for 100,000 years as a society, you better have the values of liberty at your core. You're going to self-destruct, and we're on a self-destructive path. And we're 30 trillion in debt. When I ran in 2017, I was talking about 17 trillion in debt.
Yeah,
who thinks that's sustainable? And then, personally, I've had two very good friends. One who was a briefing officer in the Pentagon, another friend from scouting who was chief medical officer of NASA. I visited Houston. I've sat in mission control. I've asked both of these individuals about this subject, and each of them answered in a very similar way, which was, look, to get the kind of job I've got, you've got to sign certain little pieces of paper that eliminate the Bill of Rights. As much as I might want to talk about some certain things that I think are really important, even with my own wife, if I were to do so, I would wind up in a place worse than Leavenworth. My wife would lose the pension and health care benefits. Please don't ask me about UFOs again. Now, for you, that's secondhand testimony, if you want. For me, it's a personal experience with two people who I've known for more than, well, in one case, 40 years, in the other case, more than 20, who I trust to be honest, good folks, medical doctor, pilot, military officer, Vietnam veteran, hero, second in command at Fort Bliss when the Space Shuttle Columbia landed there that one time in White Sands. I mean, documentable, extraordinary careers who say things to me like, if I were to tell you what I would like to tell you, I would go to a place worse than Leavenworth. Okay, so that's what motivated me in my campaigns for Congress to say we need less legislation protecting whistleblowers. We don't protect them, we persecute them. We had to tear down the statute of Lincoln and put up one to Assange and Manning and who am I leaving out? Assange, Manning, and
Snowden.
Snowden, yes, thank you.
I gave you a chance to get it.
It was right there. There's statues to them apparently in Frankfurt, Germany, or somewhere in Germany. They tear that down. I mean, I'm not unsympathetic to, I mean, my two friends in NASA and the military probably go, Joe, you're nuts. These are people who ought to be prosecuted for violating federal law. I'm not unsympathetic to that argument, but hey, why don't we get Congress to pass legislation protecting whistleblowers about crime, waste, fraud, and anything related to extraterrestrials? I'm not saying if we've recovered their technology and we know it could power the earth and end the fossil fuels industry and the petrodollar, but gee, we can't release it because if you tweak this one thing, it'll blow up the whole solar system. Maybe there's a good reason for keeping some of that stuff classified. I don't know. But what I do know is if we're not alone in the cosmos, this ought to be a birthright issue that every human on the planet deserves to know. If there's evidence out there, and maybe there's not. But I have two friends who tell me they've signed non-disclosure agreements. I think those are anti-constitutional, unconstitutional. And the Congress ought to, again, I'll repeat it, pass legislation, protect whistleblowers, waste, fraud, criminal activity, anything related to the ET issue. And then after you pass that rigorous legislation, hold open hearings. This would make for great TV. We could sell enough advertising and YouTube subscriptions and Patreon donations to maybe pay, no, we're not going to pay down 30 trillion in debt, but that would be my fantasy. What do you think of that, Zach?
I don't, when it's all good, man. So before I give you my take, and again, this isn't my hour, it's yours. But Myra chipped in here. She says she's an avid viewer of Ancient Aliens. What is your take on the show, and how much do you agree or disagree with the information they've provided?
Yeah, I haven't watched most of it, so I'm not an expert on Ancient Aliens. Steve Bassett, who I mentioned earlier, has been on a few of the shows. Nick Pope, former official in the Ministry of Defense in England, he's on there a ton. Good friend of mine. Nick's great. One of my favorite moments with Nick was in the green room at Contact in the Desert. We were watching Ancient Aliens, and he was wearing the same shirt in the green room that he was wearing on the show. And he's like, when it works, you go for it. And then I've noticed he wears that shirt about half the time. Nick's somebody who's certainly got some evidence worth looking at. What the British government had kept classified for decades that's now been released, that Nick was in charge of sifting through before it was released and is now talking about it on shows like Ancient Aliens and a bunch of others. Certainly worth listening to. I did go to Alien Con in Los Angeles in late May, early June last year. Met the writers, met the guy who says repeatedly ancient alien astronauts say, or ancient alien theorists say yes, which is a drinking game joke for Ancient Aliens if you're not doing it. Ancient alien theorists say yes. That's the statement the narrator makes to push the points they're making on the show. They didn't do a survey. Nobody actually said yes. Sure. It's great TV, but they have to fill an awful lot of hours. And to me, it's just, there's not enough content for me to stay engaged. Now, what are there, 13 seasons with 15, 20 shows each? That's a lot of hours. I'm certainly not anti-Ancient Aliens, but I do know there's been stuff on there. One of the researchers you read I'll look at who I've not mentioned before now is Donald Schmidt. Don is a good friend. He's the lead researcher now on Roswell after the passing of Stanton Friedman, for sure. And Don has complained sometimes, unless I've misunderstood him. Don't take this as a direct quote. I live in a fog most of my life. There's been some things on Ancient Aliens that they had disproven related to Roswell that the show went with, even knowing that, that's not a site like the Boy Scout Mountain site. No, that was made up by a false witness. Had a book called Roswell: The Naked Truth, if I remember. Claimed to have been naked in the back of a pickup truck having an affair when a UFO crashed into this mountainside, but that's not where anything happened in Roswell, apparently. And I think Ancient Aliens covered that. Could be wrong. Certainly it's a place to start. I mean, if you're interested in kind of a light introduction and watching it on TV rather than reading a book, I recommend Ancient Aliens highly. I hope they interview me someday. Kind of a bucket list item, be on Ancient Aliens, right?
Right. Hey, and I'm going to circle back to a reference that you made to substituting the word extraterrestrial for the word angels in the Bible. Yeah. And with this, a lot of what I've seen, and I'm not an Ancient Aliens expert by any means, but I've seen my share of the series over the years, and a lot of what they talk about really, I mean, you think about where society was at that stage and their ability to understand and grasp scientific concepts and ideas. Again, we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. And for them, if something appeared from the sky, of course they're going to equate it to being a visit from a god of some sort or something along those lines. So if extraterrestrials have been visiting the planet, and again, I don't believe it's a question of if they have. I'm sure that they have. Then you think about where even today where we're at as a society, we have a greater concept of science and technology and propulsion systems and those kind of things. But again, we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. So I think we choose to explain away, and this is why people are so adamant about religions. It's an easy way to explain what they don't understand, right?
Yeah.
So in the Ancient Aliens, kind of it gives a broader perspective on some of those explanations. So you talk about protecting whistleblowers. I want to cycle back to that a little bit too. I'm a huge advocate, and I'll just leave it at this, and I'll let you jump back in because I want to hear more of what you have to say. But I don't believe that the government can be a victim of a crime, if that makes sense to you. So for me, as a U.S. citizen, I should not be able to commit a crime against my government by reporting the truth or those types of things.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
absolutely. I mean, people enter into contracts, so this becomes civil law more than criminal law. And
yes.
sometimes you could say it's a criminal act to violate a contract. I think
yes.
One of the questions I have is, to what degree does our current government pressure contractors and employees to sign unconstitutional contracts? I'd like those tossed out vigorously. And there's a lot of fear around that. I mean, both of my friends, at least in my experience of them as they were sharing about these things, there was fear. So I don't know. And then what was I going to say based on the comment you just made around ancient aliens? Shoot, I've let it go now. Oh well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we were talking about higher powers and explaining that from a perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. You triggered it. So one of the questions is, and these are the scientific questions that take us out of the world of belief and misinterpretation of natural lights in the sky, meteors misinterpreted for UFOs, the SR-71 misinterpreted as alien technology, all that kind of stuff. Let's just move away from that and ask questions like, I wonder, the Earth is about 6 billion years old. The cosmos is about 13.7 billion years old. This is what hard science is telling us. Life started evolving here shortly after that. My friend Dr. Bruce Damer has a theory that's gaining a lot of traction now. He was on the Mars site selection team for the landers, around the origin of life not occurring in the Earth's oceans. There's too much salt, but maybe around fresh water, hot water springs, and then went through wetting and drying cycles, and that created the first cellular life, and then this evolved. Well, clearly we're out of the world of belief and religion there, because my friends who think there was a Garden of Eden and God grabbed a rib and made Eve and all of that, it doesn't really fit too well with Bruce's theory. By the way, so this is where they want to go on Mars, is to look around areas that might have had hot springs that had wetting, drying cycles and all of that. So you ask yourself, well, there's about 7 billion year start here. Cosmos 13 billion. What about a planet where life started evolving 1 billion years before us? Well, that's kind of mind-boggling, because if I were to go back with my not latest model Android smartphone, 100 years would take me to 1920. What's that going to look like? Arthur Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic, or is indistinguishable from magic. That would look like magic. It's got a freaking TV in it. TV in 1920 involved a big cable of wires and a bunch of light bulbs. Wasn't even broadcast TV. Farnsworth hadn't come out yet. Hadn't seen a guy plowing a potato field and invented the image dissector. It was black and white. Color on that thing? Even me in the 1970s, I was working in broadcast television, 2-inch videotape, big reels, giant machines. They cost $500,000 a piece in the 70s to play video. I wanted a videotape machine in my home. I thought, when I get wealthy, when I'm 30, I'll build a room in the basement and have my big videotape machine. This thing has access to all the video that's ever existed, apparently, in my pocket. I never imagined that. So 100 years. Well, forget 100 years. If we're talking about extraterrestrial life, it's easily got a 1,000-year head start on us. It's just as easily got a 10,000. It's just as easily got a 100,000-year head start on us. It could have a 1,000,000-year head start with no problem at all. It could have a 1 billion-year head start in the realm of hard science. 2 billion, 3 billion. Well, yeah. Well, it's like if the government is attempting to reverse engineer extraterrestrial created technology, it's probably like Christopher Columbus being given a nuclear-powered submarine and saying, make another one. Yeah, it's just impossible. It's not possible for us to do it on this planet at this time. So then the next question is, this life out there that's got, you pick the number, 1,000-year head start on us, 1,000,000-year head start on us. Anything in between is indistinguishable. They've probably mastered physics, math, most sciences. What's the most difficult science to master? Where's the cutting edge, that event horizon for knowledge acquisition and technology development and all that? Well, it's probably fooling around with biology. They probably experiment with DNA. Now we come around to the whole ancient alien things. Are we somebody's experiment? I don't know. But what I do know is if humanity evolves for another 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 million years, and we find some planet somewhere, and we're out there traveling around, would our descendants be the type of people that might want to tweak some DNA and see what happens and watch it for a long period of time? Would that be a kind of a fun thing to do once you've mastered all other realms of science? I don't know, but those are the kind of questions I think that lead us forward and not into a quagmire of the nuttier parts of the UFO field. What do you think?
So I don't want to believe that we are some kid's science experiment. I don't. We're the discarded science project. Pretty sure at this point he failed that project. He or she or whatever they, because who knows, right? Again, different traits are going to evolve differently in different atmospheres, and I mean, we've seen that on our own planet. We've seen asexual reproduction. We've seen those kind of things transpire right here on our planet where we thought it wasn't. So who knows what an extraterrestrial life has evolved to as far as their sustenance and sustainability as a society. Again, is it out of the scope to consider the fact that there may not be just one, but maybe billions that we don't know exist out there? And what does that look like? Again, well, we don't know what we don't know, right?
We don't, except for my theory. I come back to my theory, which I find comforting, and so that's why I come back to it. There probably are hundreds of thousands of evolved lives out there, and of every imaginable kind. But I do like to believe, and I think it's not without evidence, that unless they're libertarians, unless they have the non-aggression and self-ownership principles at the core, over a cosmic timescale, they self-destruct, and what you're left with are the people who don't practice the initiation of aggression. That's what I'd like to believe. And, maybe this is where it becomes almost a religion for me. I know we're running a little short on time, and I don't know how many people are watching, or maybe this will get viewed again, and maybe my great-grandchildren will watch this someday. So I want to be sure to put in here a couple of things. The Society for Scientific Exploration is a good place to start if you're in the mainstream science community and want to begin to look at edge science. SSE is full of PhDs. People like Dr. John Alexander, who's written a few books, UFOs, Myths, Realities, and Conspiracies, Reality Denied, Things That Can't Happen But Did. Guy has a PhD, worked in classified research in Los Alamos. John's a dear friend. We saw the 2017 eclipse together. We don't agree on everything politically. I don't know if he's watching this, but John, I love you. And I encourage people to read your books. Another one is Richard Dolan, UFOs in the National Security State. It's a 2-volume, going to be 3-volume, maybe 4 before it gets done set. I'm sure that just made him cringe because volume 3 has been being worked on for about a decade or more. Look at Dolan's stuff. Go to the paradigmresearch.group.org website that's scrolling down there and look for Dr. Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff works in classified areas of U.S. government research. He's a physicist who's published in all of the legitimate mainstream peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Puthoff helped found the International Remote Viewing Association. The U.S. government spent a lot of money on psychic spying. This has all been declassified. This really happened. They had some success. Among other things, it got turned into the motion picture, The Men Who Stared at Goats. If you saw that or not, what a great film. Well, get the DVD. Don't just watch it on Netflix, and then pull up the DVD extras. Among the people you'll find interviewed there are Jim Channon, who wrote the first Earth Battalion manual back in the 70s for the United States Army, where I'm going to go off on a couple of tangents, but anyway, the United States Army discovered that there were certain GIs that you put on point, and they had like a sixth sense, and their squad survived. So you want to develop a psychic abilities, take an 18-year-old kid, put him in a jungle, and tell him there's people about to fire at him, and see who has psychic abilities. The ones that do live, the ones that don't die. So the Army knows this. Shannon wrote a guide to the First Earth Battalion, basically trying to train United States GIs on how to be Jedi Knights to develop these psychic skills. This really happened. Anyhow, Puthoff. founding member of Irva, the International Remote Viewing Association. Get the DVD, get the extra, The Real Men Who Stared at Goats. Watch that. Dr. Alexander's on there as well. Look at the Monroe Institute and the research they do. But Dr. Puthoff gave a speech at SSE coming up on 2 years ago. It was a joint meeting of the Society for Scientific Exploration and the International Remote Viewing Association. Absolutely amazing. I was there in the audience when Dr. Puthoff said, and he received an award. He received the organization's annual Distinguished Service Award. Very happy to receive the award, helped found Irva. You'll note in the presentation, it was for both internet, remote viewing and UFOs. I've never spoken publicly about UFOs. And yet I'm being given this award for my work on UFOs. So let me tell you why. I had a non-disclosure agreement. If I had spoken about it before now, I would have been arrested and hauled away. But some things have come out that are recently declassified, and he showed the FLIR video that was shot both in the West Coast and off the East Coast by our best Navy pilots. And then he talked about recovered materials from extraterrestrial craft. What? He said, there's a lot about metamaterials I would like to discuss, but it's highly classified. There is one public source, and those were materials mailed to legendary radio talk show host Art Bell. And we've taken those around to cutting edge national laboratories. None of our national labs can reproduce this material. It's a microscopic bismuth magnesium layering. So the cutting edge of materials science, where we're taking basic elements and layering them in inconceivable ways, creates properties for these materials that are extraordinary and apparently might be being used by whoever's getting from wherever to here, if indeed that's happening. Well, you can find, I was there. So, and there was no audio video recording. I had signed a non-disclosure agreement because I was one of the presenters later that day. And I'm like, I got to get what Puthoff said. This is historic. So I went to the audio tech in the back of the room because I used to be that guy. And I said, you know, I'm a reporter for a website, independentpoliticalreport.com, where I'm one of their editors. So I'd like to get that quote from Dr. Puthoff right. I didn't write it down. Is there any way you could give me the audio? And he said, yeah, sure. So later that night, he emailed me an MP3 of 3 hours worth of that day's presentation, the whole freaking thing. So I typed up the transcript, probably in violation of my contract with SSE. I'm admitting this for the first time publicly right here, right now. And I sent it to Steve Bassett. Steve put it up on his website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. You want to look at some hard scientists. Dr. Hal Puthoff, guys published in peer-reviewed journals, talking about metamaterials and evidence of extraterrestrials visiting Earth. Go look at that, ZTrack. And I think you might change your perspective that they used to be here and then they left and they're not around anymore. Something's going on. Puthoff saying that just struck me. So I went up to him later, and I don't have a recording of this, so now we're back in the world of hearsay, but I assure you I'm an honest reporter. And I said to Dr. Puthoff, I said, you know, I'm a libertarian. I've run for Congress twice. I've called for whistleblower protection. I've called for the elimination of NDAs for people who have evidence that we're not alone in the cosmos. I'm not asking you to reveal anything classified, Dr. Puthoff. I respect that. Thank you for your service. Honest to God, I mean it. If I were read into the program, would there be some really good reason that I would agree with about why this should be kept classified, why it shouldn't be common knowledge we're not alone in the cosmos? I'm not asking you to tell me what the reason is. I'm just asking to tell me if, in your judgment, if I were to know about that, would I align with it and agree with it? Is it that compelling? And he said, yeah, it's a really good question. And he called me Dr. Buchman, which I always get a kick out of. Really good question, Dr. Buchman. And then he looks at the carpet for a while, and then he looks up and says, let me just say that I don't think the reasons are as compelling as the gatekeepers think they are. And I'm like, gatekeepers? Who are the gatekeepers? But in that moment, he had turned and walked away from me, and I didn't get a chance to ask the follow-up question. What? Oh, that's what's got me interested. I think this is stuff you can self-discover as well. Again, Richard Dolan, Don Schmidt, Paradigm Research Group, Nick Pope. These are people I would put out there as for those who are concerned about finding, harder evidence and not taking somebody's word about an extraterrestrial council that's channeling the Pleiadian command vision for the Earth, start there. And then, maybe you'll go further than I have, because I'm still kind of stuck there myself personally. I do find, by the way, one contactee incredibly credible. Travis Walton's case in Sholo, Arizona, Snowflake, Arizona. Absolutely incredible case. Disappeared for 5 days, out logging. His buddies saw the ship, saw him get struck by some discharge, maybe electrical. Couldn't find him for 5 days. They were all accused of murder. They were forced by the sheriff to take lie detector tests. They all passed them except for one guy who was working under an assumed name, trying to hide from a relatively minor crime in another town. So he was flagged. So then they say, well, they failed the lie detector test. No, there's a documentary out Jennifer Stein has done called Travis about this case, and they interview the head of the lie detector association. He says you can't get 5 people to lie about the same event and all pass. So 5 out of the 6 did. This is extraordinary. The sheriff says he believes Travis. Believed him at the time because he had a sighting of a craft that he didn't talk about at the time. Now he's talking about it. Look at Travis's case. One more thing. James Fox has got a documentary coming out called Phenomenon. It was to have had a theatrical release in September. I was to have seen it at the Sonoma International Film Festival, where it was going to make its debut last month. That's all been canceled because of the virus. But Phenomenon is going to come out, and apparently this is an extraordinary film. I've only seen the preview of it, and then I've talked to James and other people who've seen the whole film. That might be something that when you look at it will change your view of how much extraterrestrial activity and engagement with humanity's been occurring. I won't say today, but let's just say recently, over the last 5 years or so. Look at that.
That's great.
It's fun.
That's great. Joe, thank you so much. Dr. Buchman, thank you so much for joining us today. I have absolutely enjoyed talking to you. It's something that I used to be very into and very excited about, and I've kind of lost, like I said, I kind of lost my way, but I think you've kind of re-sparked some of my enthusiasm and interest in going back down that rabbit hole. And Lord knows there's enough rabbit holes to go down now.
There are enough. And, be discerning. Use your mind. Yeah. This isn't about just surrendering to some level of crazy. And feel free to give me a call. Drop me an email. I'm pretty accessible. I've not been overwhelmed, even with the coast-to-coast appearances. I love chatting about this, as you can tell.
That's great. Joe, I'll stay in touch. So,
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And you take care now.
You too.
All right, folks, thank you so much. Wow, I love it. I'm having a great time at Taxation is Theft Fest. Talking a little bit about government overreach and government control of our lives. It's always an exciting topic. We're going to take a little break here till the top of the hour, where our next speaker, Sean Jones, is coming up. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, and don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.